Well, the first thing I'm going to say before we get into any conversation is actually just two big thank yous. The first big thank you is to our audience themselves, everyone watching or listening anywhere around the world. Thank you very, very much for tuning in with us today. This is the latest episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. Today is episode 563. So it's quite surreal to say that, but thank you to everyone who has stuck by us for the past however long it's been, 5 or 6 years. But also, if you're tuning in for the first time, appreciate you very much as well. And the second big thank you is to today's guest because I'm very, very honored to welcome to the show Zen Master Sebastian Rizzon. Now, hopefully, I'm saying that the right way.
Oh, very
Um,
good.
there we are. That's good. That's good. I spend more time practicing names than I spend practicing questions. And so the second big thank you is to you, my friend, for taking time out of your morning to talk about your life, to share spiritual wisdom and advice in the hopes of helping others, which is why I do this fundamentally. And I'm just very, very grateful to you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. You put
absolutely. That's what I like to do too, and glad to introduce some of these ideas to your audience as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's going to be a fascinating talk, and I've just put my pen down so I can bow
Yeah,
to do properly there. No, it's absolutely an introduction to some people. Other people maybe who practice, perhaps they can expand their practice a little bit. But there's a lot of things that you do with the Zen schools, with the creativity, swordsmanship. I mean, there's so many things, but I'm going to just get the ball rolling with a simple question in a way, but a far-reaching one, I'm sure, which is how your interest in Zen, in Buddhism, began, in the very beginning, because I'd like to show people that even though you've been doing all of this and teaching and sharing the wisdom, and of course, I've got all of the notes here about you being I believe, the 80th teacher in your lineage and 16 years in the temple and the schools that you run, the swordsmanship, and we'll get into all of that. But before all of that, where was your interest in these kinds of practices first sparked, first ignited in terms of wanting to get involved in Buddhism? May we start there, please? Thank you.
yeah. I mean, I think that's an important thing. I think a lot of times these kind of practices can seem unapproachable to, regular everyday type people. They think, oh, you have to, go up on a mountain and meditate in a remote area. So I think it's really great to start there because I come from a very normal, American cultural background, all of the things you probably associate it with that. But yeah, it was a kind of a long journey, first, and I'm gonna tell a long story here just because I feel like it will maybe help people see themselves in my story. But yeah, I think I first got introduced to like Eastern philosophy in high school. Uh, and one of the first books I read was Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And that was just, at the time, I just thought it was a nice story. And I read a few other books, which were um, Western versions of Eastern philosophy, loosely Buddhist, but not necessarily explicitly. Um, and that got me very interested in the idea of like enlightenment, and they were talking about, these were fictional accounts, so they were talking about some um, internal experiences that sounded pretty fascinating to me. So I think that is kind of where the spark started, and I had been just got kind of going through my life. I had also been a martial arts practitioner for a good portion of my life. And for me, I think I was working as an engineer at the time and, doing a regular job, going to work every day. And I found myself, it was a great job, first of all, but just felt a little dissatisfied. And um, ultimately, little I had a I would consider like a low point in my life. It was involved heartbreak. I don't want to get too much into the details of that, but and then I became a little more, um, I became a little more self-reflective about what was missing from my life. And at the time, my housemate at the time, we had been talking about he was interested in Eastern philosophy. He pointed me to the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching, which are um, kind of foundational to a lot of Eastern philosophy, tangentially related to Buddhism. And we were having some good discussions. I felt them, like through these kind of discussions, I was finding some relief. And then he actually pointed me to a Buddhist temple, a Zen temple down the street from us, where they did martial arts classes and meditation classes. So it was a pretty fortunate. It was like 2 blocks away. And it took me a while to kind of turn a corner just to even go visit, I think, but yeah, I went and visited, and then I just felt like if what they were doing really seemed to speak to what I was missing. It was like physical, it was the meditation, it was the community, and I eventually ended up enrolling and just started going to after school or after work classes. Um, and from there, I think I went to my teacher, who is a great Zen master, Changsi Kim. He's from Korea. He ran that temple. He gave a talk, and I felt for the first time like this person really knows what he's talking about. Something just really resonated in my heart. I can't remember exactly what he talked about, but that was the hook for me. That got me really interested in what was going on. So I started to, practice regularly, and then came to a point with like my housemates where everybody was kind of going different ways, and I needed to find another place to go. And this temple had a residential program, and I was a little hesitant because there's like a lot of rules. It is for lay people. It's not like you have to be a monk. Um, but there's still a lot of rules, a lot of a kind of a heavy schedule on top of work. But I decided to go for it and move in, and just really felt like it was filling all of the voids in my life at that point, and decided to immerse myself in it. I had only been practicing a few months before I decided to move in, and then I ended up living. Long story short, from here on, this is the beginning, but I ended up living with my in the temple with my teacher for 16 years, which was also the last 16 years he was alive. I kind of left shortly after he passed away and started my own school. So that is kind of how I ended up where I am today. And I was one
Wow.
of the people who lived at the temple. I was like the longest residential student, I think, in the history of that temple. So,
Wow. That is incredible, incredible story. I mean, first of all, Sebastian, the first aspect that you said there about making this whole thing approachable, absolutely. I mean, we're on the same page with that, and also in terms of the series of steps you had to go through to get there, it's very relatable, it's very accessible, it's very human, your story, which is one of the things I like. The great books you mentioned there. I think all of those three that you mentioned are here or on one of these shelves. There's another shelf here, but great books. Anyway, so living there, okay. Now I have to ask a question here. You went in, you thought, okay, I'll try this out. I need to find another place to live. I'll go and live in the temple. Cool. But at the beginning, say in the first few months you were there, I don't know, something like that, did you ever think it might actually be 16 years, it might actually be that long down the road, or was it more of a gradual um, process? Because it sounds like a gradual process that took you there. But I'm just curious if when you actually arrived at the temple, you ever thought, I'm going to be spending that many years here, or if you just thought we'll take this a step at a time and that kind of thing. Just to highlight that one point that I think is really interesting, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like I'll say the first month, and then this I'm digging back into my memory quite a bit. It seems like another lifetime. But this was about 20 years ago at this point. And yeah, I remember the first month was a huge adjustment. And I think I had a lot of misconceptions that I was not even aware were misconceptions. I think just a lot of I basically grew up around a lot of uh, like in a Christian culture, essentially. And I think I was kind of assuming it was more or less the same kind of structures and beliefs. Despite what I had read, it's the Tao Te Ching is a little different, but like I think I had just vastly different expectations from what it was. Especially Zen being one of the more it's more about a lived experience than reading a bunch of books or like a Bible or something like that. Um, so I had it was a difficult adjustment. The schedule was probably, just the basic schedule without anything else. It was, I was working full time, commuting 2 hours a day as well, and um, the schedule added about like 16 hours plus to, my weeks. Um, but so in the difficulty, I think I was just like, I'm just gonna see. I think my attitude was basically, I'm just gonna see how long I can do this for. I'm already feeling like I'm getting a positive feedback, positive impact on my life, and I'm just gonna stick with it. But yeah, like it was I didn't see it that way. I felt like the structure was a quite a vast change from where I had been. Just like the rules of the temple are, you're not supposed to take anything more than you need. If you take food, you're supposed to eat everything you take. Um, just having everything be completely clean all of the time, being on a schedule, getting up very early to bow and chant, going to work, coming back, doing the martial arts practice or meditation practice, depending on the day. Um, and then, extra classes and such on the weekend, and then work at the temple, doing like chores around the temple on for like half of the day on Sundays. So it was quite an adjustment when you're used to just having your free time and but I felt like I wasn't getting, previously wasn't getting enough out of my life in those hours. And I th and for me, it was hard, but it was also very rewarding. So
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. A fascinating insight, especially in the way that you were doing it with sort of working and coming back there and being, being a layperson, but being in the world and because I've also spoken with a number of um, fully fledged monks, people who don't come out of there as much. And so it's an interesting balance. And with that being said, with your teacher, I would like to give this a mention as well, because having been there for so many years and having worked with him for so many years, and studied uh, under him for that length of time, how would you describe the relationship? And I'm not sure this is something we can do full justice to in a short question like this, but just in terms of the fact that there's obviously a formality with the teacher-student relationship and Zen as a whole, but there must also be a deep affection and a deep understanding of each other that developed over that length of time of being so close. And I don't have a really specific question, but I would really enjoy hearing some of your reflections on the teacher-student relationship, especially with regard to how you define what a teacher actually is. as well in terms of that aspect of the relationship, because I think that people have maybe different and quite diverse opinions about that. So if that makes sense when I'm going with this topic, can we talk about that a little bit, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, when I first moved in, he was like he felt like a magical person to me. In He just kind of projected this energy that was you could feel it. And, he was a relatively small person, about 5 feet tall, and he had a thick Korean accent. He was like kind of self-taught in English. Um, but yeah, everything he said, I always captured my attention, and this is kind of where I was like projecting a lot of stuff. I think at first I thought he was like almost magical and omniscient, and like he was at that point I don't remember exactly how old he was. It must have been 60s, and he was still like an amazing martial artist. So there was like that aspect of it, and then the things he would say when he would speak in his Dharma talks. Uh, and I always felt like he could see through me. Like if I was no matter what I was saying, like I felt like um he was like aware of what was in my mind. So it was a very I was very intimidated by him, I think, at first, and I really wanted to make a positive impression on him. So I think I was walking on eggshells around him for quite a while. But over time, he was a very friendly person. He's very strict. So as far as following the rules, telling you if you're not doing something correctly, regarding the temple. But over time, and this is a long arc, I, found him to be just 100% human, and definitely like a special, like he had put a lot of work into himself. I think that's what made him special. But um, yeah, I went from feeling like I could never be like him to being like, okay, I could see now that he's human. And then, um, I think that like what he's doing is possible for me at some point. And that was a very long arc of evolution. And then as far as like, what was your question about the teaching? I want to kind of address that as far as
Well, essentially, what I would say, what it simply put, what it means to be a teacher, because obviously you were a student of his during that time, and of course, there's the development, as I mentioned earlier, with it being the 80th member of the lineage, and there's the progression. But then now that you've come into your own, running your own schools and teaching, how we define what a teacher actually is. And I suppose, by the way, sorry to add even more to this, but that then leads people into how they find the right teacher for them. But it's really, yeah, what a teacher is, how people can find the right teacher, that kind of dynamic I would like to discuss, please. Thank you.
yeah, I think like it's hard to, there's like a knowledge base I think you need to have, which in Zen is interesting because there's no like manual or book, or it's all done through lived experience and guidance through from a teacher. So, but I do think there is, knowledge over that time that's accumulated through hearing them talk and things like that, and just the basics of what Zen practice is. But it's not about learning like history so much. There are stories that are told, but it's always in a context of like trying to teach you something about your life. Um, and but I think the big thing in Zen is it's an embodied and lived practice. So the teacher, in my mind, the teacher teaches by example of their own way of living and demonstrating that to people. Of course, there's, things they'll say and tell you and instruct you on over that course, but the most important thing is demonstrating through your own actions that the types of things you're supposed to be doing. And in Zen, it's basically a study or an it's about developing an understanding of your own mind and your own being and what's at the center of your being, and using the practice, the lived practice, to understand that. And it's a direct experience. It can't be given to you by your teacher telling you something or telling you what it is. You have to understand it for yourself. And so one of the things, the way it was taught, is through um, being completely engaged and focused on what you're doing. So if you're doing the dishes at the temple, making sure you're doing the dishes, cleaning them properly, putting them back, drying them off, putting them back on the shelf, um, the work and the cleaning you're doing around the temple, those things, doing them with clarity. Like if you're making mistakes in what you're doing, it's a sign that you're not engaging with what you're doing. Your mind's probably wandering. And and then the our in-body practice was the martial arts there. So using the choreography of the martial arts to as a form of meditation, staying completely focused on what you're doing. Um, if you're making mistakes, or if your mind starts to drift or wander, that's usually when you make a mistake. So it becomes a way for you to learn how to keep your mind clear in each moment and every moment of what you're doing around the temple. Originally, for me, it was much easier to do, doing a martial arts technique, because it kind of demanded your attention. But then eventually, through doing all these different things every day, trying to do it in a mindful way, you get better and better at doing it. And he was instructing us on that, kind of holding us accountable, but also most importantly, I think, demonstrating through his own life doing these things, and that is really what made him who he is. And all of the things I had originally perceived as magical, where he had gotten there through just very simply completely focusing on what he's doing. And he was a quite amazing person. He would do some amazing demonstrations with his martial arts, which would demonstrate that he was completely focused, and like things where he would blindfold himself and cut an apple on someone's stomach with a sword. So um, he never asked anybody else to do that, but I think it was just to show kind of like what is possible with the power of your mind. And um, yeah, uh, so I think in some ways he was trying to inspire us, demonstrate, and then instruct verbally, but also through, the actions in the temple.
I understand very much. It's a beautiful description, a very eloquent description, and what you're saying there about the lived experience and everything is really what is special about this tradition in particular. And it's very interesting. I mean, I have obviously met with certain teachers and had certain experiences, and not for the same length of time as you. But that comment that you mentioned earlier about where you felt that he could see sort of into you, and you felt that he could see through you, if you like, and things. I've had that experience as well, and I've had a strange experience sitting with certain teachers where I learn things, if you like, or not so much learn things, but I experience things just from being in their presence somehow, that then is transformative. And it's interesting that you mentioned that phenomena. So coming back to the questions themselves, I have to resist the temptation to go off topic into so many things. One of the things I think is important for our conversation today is obviously you mentioned about the martial arts and these aspects of the teachings. Was the creativity part of your life at the temple, or did that come later? Because I've seen or I've read things about poetry and about artwork and about other sort of creative endeavors that you pursue. And I'm just curious as to, including obviously with your school and the Zen Art Center and different, there's a big part of it. But was that always part of the teachings back then, or was that something that developed at a later date with the creative aspects, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was not taught in a formal manner. My teacher was also a poet and like a calligrapher, like he did big like Chinese characters and calligraphy. Um, so he was maybe teaching through demonstration, but he was never like it wasn't part of the curriculum there. The art for that school was the martial art, which had come, the story of that of his martial art as it had come to him through his own meditation. So he had never learned martial art. When he went on his 90-day retreat when he was at a temple in Korea, when he came down from that, he had somehow like for lack of a better word, like downloaded all of this martial arts knowledge. And that's what he was teaching. So um it so his and then he was teaching Zen through that martial art and through also the traditional means. And then as far as the art, he was doing it and like I would see him doing it, he would read his poems, but never like instructing us on doing that kind of stuff. So the story with that is like um so a few years in um I just discovered through my own practice that I had never been an artist, that all of a sudden I was able to draw anything I wanted. I like had this well of creativity I could tap into. And yeah, and so I basically found through uh, my own practice that this artistic skill and inspiration had come out of it. And this is kind of like the equivalent for me of what his martial arts was, is my art practice. And so now, um, in the art and poetry, I use that term very broadly. So that is now my t primary teaching method for Zen, is through creative endeavors. And I think the connecting material here between, or the connective tissue between, what he was doing, what I'm doing, is that anything can be a meditation or can be a form of Zen. Um, so his was the martial arts, mine is art, writing, things like that, using both the meditation of clearing your mind to create space for new ideas to come in and creative ideas, and then also using the actual practice of making the art or writing or whatever the art form is as your form of meditation. So like an embodied meditation, or moving meditation is what he used to call it. Um, and I think sitting meditation was always part of the practice, but I think one of the reasons, for instance, I had read about, to kind of circle back, I had read about Buddhism and sitting meditation, and I had tried it, and it just never felt like it was working. It found it very difficult to stay still, and I ended up always giving up and not continuing. And so my teacher showed me that the movements could be a meditation. And for me, that was a huge turning point where I realized the meditation doesn't just have to be that. That made, honestly, like that was much easier as a form of meditation. And I felt always coming out of like a practice with a clear mind. But then also, like when I went to sit and meditate, all of a sudden I could do that as well. So I think it's important to have different avenues into this form of mindfulness or meditation or moving meditation. And Zen is I think I this is one of the one of the misconceptions I had about Zen, I think at first, was that I thought it was sitting meditation, just pretty much only that. And through through my teacher, that was not what the primary form. It was everything you're doing. And when I've started to look into the history of Zen, and I actually started doing this because I was really curious, like, what does the word Zen mean? And so I traced it back through historical documents. It comes from the Chinese word Chan, which was then Chana was like a an abbreviated form of the word Chana, which came from the Pali and Sanskrit word jhana or dhyana, which in the like Lankavatra Sutra, it says there's like four stages of dhyana, but it's basically being completely present with what is in your experiences. It says nothing about, sitting with your eyes closed. It's just about completely engaging effortlessly with whatever is in your experience. And that's like the highest level. The lower levels require, you know, um, some effort and focus. But yeah, that's kind of the spectrum of what it is. And um, I didn't know that until after my teacher had already passed away, but I had known it through that's how he taught it, but I didn't know that was the actual definition of the word or origin of the word. And so I already at this point my practice had been and my teaching had been oriented towards teaching people that whatever you're doing, whatever's in front of you is your meditation.
That's a beautiful description. That is a very, very beautiful description and very valuable to people, Sebastian, because how many of us carry that misconception that sitting is the only thing? And I remember um, coming across something to do with Thich Nhat Hanh and walking meditation at one point early on, and just. But the reason I mention that is just a specific turning point for me that there's other ways of doing this there. Wow, I didn't know that early on in the journey. And what you've said, it takes it to a whole other level. That anything can be used as a means of meditation. It's a wonderful, wonderful message. So when we come to the lineage concept, because I consider this to be very valuable. And by the way, what you said earlier about the connective tissue, I'm glad you said that because I try my best to link the topics, and really everything we were getting at until that point is anything can be used as meditation. But the other thing I think is very important is the lineage aspect, because your teacher taught you, but before him people would have taught him, and back it goes. And now of course you're continuing that. So I would like to talk about the process of starting your own school, and the fact that you are um, carrying the torch, if you like, for want of a better term, and nurturing the next generation of Zen teachers and practitioners, and whichever form that takes. But I think in order to discuss that, we have to talk about when your teacher passed away. It's a sad time, so I'm sorry to bring that up. But more in terms of the transition, in terms of the fact that you thought, okay, I'm not going to stay at this temple after 16 years. I'm going to start, you're going to start your own school. That's a big decision. So I would like to talk about the steps as to how that came to be, with the view of, again, your transition from, let's say, student to teacher. I mean, I know, and that before that you'd moved up ranks and you've done various things, but it's an interesting transition from student to teacher. So may we begin moving into that aspect of your journey, please? Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I'll always be consider myself his student, right?
Yes,
And then
yes,
I also think
absolutely.
I learn from my students now. So I think that, that transition it's not black or white. It's very gray all the time. Um, but yeah, as far as like the official, um, um, the official movement from, being a student to a teacher, how that all happened, I think after I had basically found my own form of teaching through the art, and I knew at that point my teacher was still alive, and I had not discussed this with him, and I'll get to that, but like I already knew my plan was that I had to teach in my own way, and I wanted to teach. I just wanted to show, an even wider, um, variety of what's possible through, of approaches to Zen, if you will. He had martial arts. I now had art and writing and this other well of things I wanted to teach, and I felt like it would cast a wider net. So that was my plan, and around that time where I was having that realization, he got really severe cancer in his stomach, and it it was like it was very he wasn't he didn't share a lot about like how sick he was, but we all had the impression. I think everybody was just hopeful, including him, that he was going to get through it. But I found out in retrospect it was bad. It was like, stage 4. They'd given him 2 years to live. I didn't know this at the time, but I could tell he was sick. And he went through a series of treatments in that last 2 years. So I never really wanted to, I wanted him to keep all his energy for surviving. I didn't want to burden him with the idea of me leaving. I was also the main person who knew, how to keep the temple running without him. Um, and yeah, I just started to really make sure everybody there could do what needed to be done to keep the temple going. And there was other capable people there as well. So I wasn't too worried about it, but it was just like I knew I was doing so much of what needed to be done around there. But I had told them all as well that like I probably only had my time there was limited basically. And then he ended up passing away after like 2 years from the diagnosis. Um, and I just, I kind of helped transition from that to making sure that everything would be stabilized there. And I knew it was basically the end of the road for me. I needed to be able to teach in my own way. The school there was completely oriented around the martial arts and the incorporation of Zen, and I needed to have an more expansive version of that, to stay true to my own heart. So yeah, so I started basically with just an idea, and uh, I moved, to a town on the other side of Boston, and basically moved into an art studio for my initial school, and kind of at first it was just for me to kind of like hone myself and figure out like my teaching, what it's going to be exactly, like how it's going to be done formally. I kind of expanded into bigger spaces, started welcoming in a small community of people, teaching them through talks. And then as I got a bigger space, now I have, larger groups of meditation classes, art groups, writing groups, things like that, different forms of moving meditation, dance, martial arts, things like that. All these things going on. Different teachers too. I'm agnostic about the art forms. I don't teach, I'm not an art teacher because I never took art. I don't know how to teach it. I mean, I can always offer tips and stuff, but like I was never formally trained in art. And so I teach how to turn your art into a meditation, how to use art forms you already have into meditation, um, and have different, teachers and things, different members of the community um, contributing to the teaching and to the meditations.
Uh, that is, that's well, again, that's a beautiful description, Sebastian. I know I said that before, but the way that um, you paint pictures with words as well. When we're speaking here, let's put it that way. But it's a wonderful meaning behind why you're doing what you're doing, finding your own style, and also what you said earlier about sort of being an eternal student and a teacher, and the exchange with your students. You learn from them, they learn from you. Wonderful, because that's the connective tissue to what we were saying earlier about what is a teacher, and that's a wonderful wonderful path we've gone down with that. Now, as we focus on a couple of things here that are, let's say, bigger picture or just a little bit broader, in the sense of you're teaching now in your own style, and of course, people that you teach in X number of years will potentially go on to be teachers themselves. Now, it's not all about teachers. I mean, as you said, Zen is all about lived practice. It's all about life. So people will take what you teach and can carry it into day-to-day life. But in terms of the next generation of teachers, specifically, what are your aspirations, if you like, or how do you measure the impact that you're having in that way in terms of specifically nurturing the next generation of Zen teachers specifically? As I've said, that's not to disregard anyone who's learning for other reasons. They might not become a teacher. But like you went into the temple in the beginning, you ended up staying there for 16 years. I mean, maybe there's people who've been working with you and they'll continue working with you for a very long time and then go on to teach. I'm curious about how you measure that, what some of your reflections are on that form of impact, and what it actually means to be nurturing the next generation of Zen teachers in the US and potentially globally. Um, Again, I don't have a really narrow question, but just that topic as an overview, I think is very relevant to mention, please, if we may. Thank
Yeah,
you.
for me, excuse me. Sorry, something was in my throat there. Um, it's a great question, honestly. I think when a person is just getting started, I think there's basic things they need to understand about what Zen is. Maybe dispelling some of the misconceptions we talked about, teaching them that there's all these different forms of Zen and meditation. Um, so that would be, like the basics of Zen that need to be imparted to people in different ways. But my mark of success is if for a teacher, I mean, I think first of all, anyone can take this knowledge and use it in their life and show other people through their own actions how to do this. They don't have to be formally labeled a teacher. I think I have people in my community already who haven't been here all that long doing this. They've already started to use it and teach with their own lives and using it in their daily lives. So, but the my ultimate hope for all of these students is to become teachers in their own right, learning how to take what I've given them as far as what I teach in class and the guidance I can offer and turn that into their own unique form of Zen. Like, I think everybody can be a unique vessel for these teachings. I think everybody has something unique to offer that's not what I'm doing. The same way my teacher was doing martial arts, I'm doing art, writing in different art forms. My hope is that everybody can take what I'm teaching, the guidance I'm giving, and connect with that with what is in their own mind and learn what their own gift to the world is going to be in how they teach. Um, and I can give pretty specific examples. I've been pretty fortunate to have some good students. The current other Zen teacher in our school, her name is Nadia Monsif. She has been studying me with me for a bit of over a year, but as through her own meditation, she has her own set of interests, completely different from mine. One of the things when she came in, she was into like tarot reading and things like that, which is definitely not part of Zen. I'm just mentioning like, I mean, technically anything can be Zen, so I don't want to say it's not, but like it's not traditionally part of Zen. And I think she didn't really like the system, but then through her own meditation, she had like a moment of inspiration where the idea for a deck of Zen oracle cards came through her. So like a way to teach Zen through a system, kind of like tarot, where you're kind of pulling cards. This also reminds me very similar to like doweling in the I Ching, where like basically roll a you you use some form of like casting to find out like what part of the I Ching applies to you right now. So she created like a deck of cards with uh, Zen themes, which she calls it reflective oracle cards. So they just are supposed to reflect through kind of like pulling a card, understanding what the card means, like what does that mean to you, and learning how to use that to kind of inform your own practice, maybe where you should be focusing your attention on yourself. And it's not about telling you, it's not like about magic or anything. It's just kind of like, what do you get when you hear this kind of like Zen lesson? What does that mean to you, and how are you going to apply that to your own life? And I thought that was just like a really great example of how she took things I had been saying and teaching and just translated it into her own form of teaching. I also work with a few dancers, and I'm not a dancer, but they are, um, through collaborative efforts, they've been taking like my poetry and dancing to it. And I don't know enough about how to say anything about how they're doing it, but to me, it through their movements, it really captures and tells the story of what I'm trying to tell. So, um, so I've seen little pieces of already of like what I'm hoping to just expand that and use so that everybody can use their own unique skills, kind of marry it with the Zen teaching and learn how to reach more people in that way. And I think like that's the kind of the idea is that we all they're like tools for you to reach your own full potential. And I teach the tools. I can't teach you how to reach your full potential. It's like you use the tools and what's already there, and you have to kind of put those two things together, and that's how you become your own teacher. And that's to me what success looks like.
I like that. I like that a lot, Sebastian, because becoming well, it's like a process of uncovering, I mean, as you were saying that, I thought of it's probably a strange example, but one of the great sculptors, I think it might have been Michelangelo, said about how the statue was already inside the stone and he had to uncover it rather than create it, if you like. And I think that there's a fascinating um, description there, and I love that actually with the cards because it's a very unique form of expression, that comes from Zen. I'm going to ask you another question with this then, because we'll do the last sort of two or three topics now. We'll wrap up. fairly soon. But because you have such a deep understanding of so many years of practice, or such a deep experience, I should say, in the truth of this process, but you're also not rigid. I can ask you this question. When you mentioned about earlier about your teacher learned martial arts from the meditation, you did that 90 days and you came down and and you had a similar experience with the drawing and with the artwork and so forth, and people have that experience. And people do describe it like a download, if you like. In your view, where does that come from, if you like? And this might not be a question that you're able to even answer. But it's like for example, I wrote a book last year. I just published my first book in November. I'm working on another one now, and the concepts of those are um, downloaded. I mean, I don't know exactly. I'm meditating. It suddenly becomes clear, and I think, right, that's what I need to do. It has the right intentions. It has the right meaning behind it. It's always to help others. It's never about me, etc. But the concept just crystallizes. And I've met a lot of people. Do you think that, and I am going to go out on a limb with this one, do you think that's coming from somewhere internally in our consciousness, or do you think there's any way that that's coming from an outside source, and through the practice of Zen, we are still enough and calm enough to actually notice? So there's a strange question for you, but I've just got the feeling that people listening to this will want to know. I must admit, I would like to know, because it seems to be such a common experience, doesn't it? Almost like it's transmitted from somewhere.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this in a few different ways, and hopefully when I describe it from different angles, it might make more sense. Um, so it's both and neither of the things you said, in the sense that it's a bit beyond words. And so, but in Zen tradition, we call that mind. It comes from the mind. And that too is a bit of a metaphor. And it also has like a lot of that word in English has a lot of baggage. Like a lot of people think mind and brain are the same thing. They're synonymous. Mind comes from brain. Uh, and in the tradition I come from, in like Chinese and Korean language, mind and heart are actually the same word. So it's like whatever that we'll just say the mind or the heart is the center of your being. That's what I'm pointing to when I say that word, first of all. And as far as where that comes from, so the idea a lot with Zen practice is thoughts, concepts, things like this. You like to take a concept of brain. People say, okay, we have a brain in our head. That's where our mind comes from. But truthfully, that's an idea that's in your mind. So really, brain exists only in mind. But I'm going someplace with this because these words and concepts and divisions create boundaries which truthfully don't really exist. Even the idea of I am me, you are you, this is me, that's the world. Those boundaries are very hard, even with science, to pin down where those actual lines exist. Um, and in truth, they don't exist. And when I describe Zen as being, like present, engaged with what things your experience as it is, before all of those thoughts and concepts and things, ideas, sometimes they're pre-thought and concept, but it divides the world up into these kind of artificially created boundaries. And as those disappear, you realize everything is connected, truthfully. Like we're not separate from the world. We're part of the world. And so I think when we get these kind of downloads, it's because those boundaries have dissolved or thinned out, and you have access to more um, you have access to more of the world than you usually would because you're not creating these boundaries. And I think when you reach something like and you can reach this, in sports, in martial arts, in writing, in creative endeavors, you reach like a flow state where you're just doing and you're not thinking. And that's when those kind of downloads happen. It's when you're completely present in the moment, not getting in your own way of what's happening. And then all of these things come through. And like I think your experience is kind of reflecting what I'm talking about. It doesn't feel like it comes from you, but it's definitely coming out of your and it's kind of just being funneled through your own little uh facet of this bigger thing. So kind of like thinking like what comes out, I'm going to use another metaphor. Like it's like the this light that's out there just ambiently, and we're all kind of a prism, and the light comes through us and it comes out in our own unique spectrum of colors, but it's not the light isn't ours. We're like a prism for the light, and all of us are basically uh, forms of different um, different aspects of the same light. I don't know if that's helpful or confusing, but
Uh,
that's a
it's actually very helpful. It's actually very, I mean, speaking personally, now it's actually very, very helpful. Obviously, I believe it will be very helpful for our audience as well. It makes more sense than you realize, based on other experiences I've had and other people I've met. And um, funnily enough, even one or two conversations I've had outside of Buddhism, even with people in sort of Hindu or Veda, yogic traditions, have described a similar thing, but I've heard it described best in Buddhism itself, obviously. I also think that those divisions, not only those divisions exist supposedly in our separation from the world, but I think, or I've experienced that they appear to exist internally. So I have a division with myself, if you like, of saying, well, like with drawing, if I say, well, I can't draw, then it's something there. There's some type of division, and if we dissolve that, you have access to more of yourself in some way. I mean, I've experienced that type of thing. I'm not explaining that very well, so it definitely makes sense, and that's one of the most fascinating aspects of this. Um, and yeah, I've heard people pose the question. I've posed the question. That makes a lot of sense, in terms of breaking down the barriers. Okay, and that leads me to my final, probably my final point today is with regards to the application of Zen in the world itself, which is really what it's meant for. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but I'll put it in the simplest terms I can, right? The world would be a better place if more people practice this, and I'm not an activist or an idealist or anything. I'm just saying that purely pragmatically. I'm talking with you now, and by the way, you'll find it interesting, Sebastian, that I apply that process with my interviews as well, where I sort of, on this piece of paper that's by me here, I have the points about your life of, 16 years and your teacher and all that. I don't have any questions because I know that when I sit and talk with you, they will come to me, if you like, generally speaking. Um, but this one is basically, I believe that there would be more harmony and more compassion in the world if more people practice this, right? So, in other words, you're talking with me now. It's the first time we've met. I can tell that you see me sort of as I really am, and you don't have the projections, and you're just entirely involved in this conversation. You are a Zen master, so one would hope so, but on paper, but I really feel that, and I mean that sincerely.
thank you.
Um, And I have that experience with you that I described earlier, where you sit with a master and you have the experience in their presence, not only with the words and the concepts, but in sort of in your body. My question, although it's abstract, is how can more people apply that? Because if more people saw other people as they really are, and the fact that we're all connected, as you were saying earlier, and not as their preconceived notions, there would be greater peace and harmony in the world. And my question is how we can bring that about. So even in the island, on the island that I live on, in Cyprus, there's two sides. I'm not sure if you know about that, but there's a Christian side and there's a Muslim side, and they're separated. And there was a terrible war that happened here in 1974. So you know it's before my time, but the history is still prevalent everywhere. It's still very apparent. You know, entirely unnecessary because not that anyone wants to hear this, and I'm not sure if any Cypriots watch this, but there's actually a lot of shared heritage in terms of genetic heritage and cultural heritage between the two sides, even though they ended up fighting each other. So my question to you is, how can people apply these practices to cultivate greater compassion on a day-to-day basis, even if they don't want to be a Zen teacher? Since I've been practicing this, simple things like road rage, for example, I used to have that as a younger man, have entirely disappeared. Um, because the first thing is I think, well, you know, that person's probably had a really bad day. They're certainly not doing it to annoy me. They're doing it because, you know, they've been fired from their job or, you know, their partner's giving them a hard time or maybe it's good news. Maybe they just had a baby and they're rushing, their wife's just had a baby and they're rushing to the hospital. You know, you have a different perspective on things. So I would like to go into as my final topic, and this is coming from whatever lack of divisions we were just talking about, the cultivation of compassion and your advice on how people can do that on a day-to-day level and how that connects with mindfulness, please. Does that make sense where I'm going with this?
Yeah, there's just a lot. There's so much you talked about that I kind of want to respond to in this in that
Sorry.
yeah, I think first of all these divisions are again like between religions and they're all very conceptual. And I think that adherence and rigidity can kind of it becomes its own form of restraint on people, I think. But I do think honestly, I'm not a religious scholar, but I notice a lot of things when I hear um, enlightened people from other religions that they are all kind of pointing to the same thing. They are. And these aren't always the people in charge of the church. I'm just saying the people who really seem to get it, they're pointing to something so similar. A lot of times they use the word God or unity with God. I don't tend to use that. I just kind of feel like that's another word that has like a lot of baggage with it. It means so many things to so many different people. And but I think if you look a lot at like every one of the world religions kind of has its own mystical faction where they're trying to embody the teachings and they all, you know, seem to really have a very similar understanding. When I hear them talk, I feel like, oh, they're talking about the same thing that I am. And Zen to me, I think Buddhism is a bit of a, you know, a little bit more it's different. There's all different aspects of it. Some of them more rigid than others. Zen is very loose. It doesn't require any belief system. It doesn't require that you believe in Buddha or that he's the greatest teacher. It just says this is a way to you know drop all of these divisions. And if you believe in God, that's okay. If you're a Christian, a Muslim, you can be a Zen version of those things. It doesn't have it's like belief agnostic. It's kind of just like what happens when you completely engage with what's going on. And I think anybody can take these kind of techniques and use them themselves. Uh, you spoke also of your own interviewing process, how you're just engaging with whoever you're speaking to, and the conversation just flows, and you get to all of these more interesting places, probably shared experiences. We've had similar things like that. I'm just assuming it's similar in other conversations. Like this like like magic, if you will, of doing this. It leads you to make these connections for these boundaries to dissolve between people with who come from different perspectives, different places. If you completely engage with them, you find so much commonality and connection. And ultimately, the ultimate truth is that it's all connected. It's inseparable. Uh, all the separation is, mental activity that's separating things basically. And when that quiets down, either through meditation or through just engaging with what you're doing, when that mental activity calms down, you see that everything is connected. And that is like a source of empathy, a source of compassion. When you realize we're all connected, when you realize we all have these shared experiences, that's what makes us more empathetic and compassionate to other people. And that's why I think this type of practice, regardless of what your religion is or your belief system is, it can be very helpful to you just to have a more harmonious life. And I just want to also say, it's never, I think a lot of people have these like real idealist projections, like everything is supposed to be perfect. You're always going to be happy. Nothing bad ever happens. That's never the truth. The world is what it is. There's it's the only thing you have control over is your own equanimity. Uh, you know, and you're still, even enlightened Zen masters make mistakes. Things people think are mistakes. It's uh everybody is still human and has all of the same characteristics of other humans. It's just when your mind is clear, you're much more able to adapt to whatever is happening and make take actions that will hopefully produce more harmony in the world. That's the like the kind of the bodhisattva ideal, is that when you take yourself out of the picture, all of your actions are oriented towards creating harmony. And love is like kind of the unifying energy between us, and compassion is the action of helping other people. And that's really a lot of like Buddhist traditions kind of teach that first, but in Zen it just says just get rid of those boundaries and all of that will become clear to you when those are gone. So it's kind of the two different ways around the same circle. Um, and I just think Zen is it can be it's accessible to a lot of people because it's very agnostic about what your beliefs are. It's just try to stay focused on what you're doing. Try to clear your mind while you're doing it, and see what happens.
Well, that is, I'm off mute. Yeah, I'm just muting because there's a dog barking and there's construction going on out there. So hopefully you can't hear any of that, but if it comes over, so be it. Absolutely. I had this conversation recently with a really good friend of mine, called George, who's helped me a lot, and he's a Christian minister, and I was telling him about Zen, and we were having this conversation of the fact that I tried to explain it's a practice, it's something you do, something you are. And I explained it as being a practice, sort of like yoga, because we had this conversation, although there's some big differences there, but in principle, it's something that you do and something you embody. Because certain people have the idea that, the Buddha is the God and all of that. And I was trying to explain, no, no, it's, you've explained it much better than me. But it's partly things like that that really encourage the unity, if you like, amongst us all. And yeah, as you said, I'm not a pacifist or an idealist. I don't like to be any type of ist, if you like, with the labels. But just the principle of compassion still applies. And obviously, when we're having this conversation today, there's a wonderful feeling of compassion coming from yourself, Sebastian. So, it bears mentioning, especially because of maybe it's on my mind, from a certain point of view, because of the conflicts that are nearby to here, but it applies very much in the world as a whole. So, thank you very, very much. Today, we've talked about some interesting topics, and I think that, or I feel that one of the things that is really powerful about our talk today is the experiential element, in the sense that people will have an experience when they're listening to this, but also you're encouraging people to have their own experience. And I love that about Zen, but I love that about you as an individual, including the way you teach and the way you share the experience with others and so forth, to encourage them to find their own way. Absolutely fantastic. So I want to thank you very, very, very much for taking time out of your morning to have this conversation with me, to speak so openly, about your own life, and to a certain extent, the highs and the lows. You've obviously the good experiences, but also some of the struggles that you've had that have taught you things. All of these things, speaking from the heart, is very, very much appreciated. And I always say, to help even one person with a talk like this to have a realization, then it's worth doing. And I believe it will be more, but even so, and the good thing about this format is that today, people might listen to it when I put this out, probably say early next week when I put this out, but then somebody might listen to it 5 years from now, for example, when they're ready to, I want to say open up. I mean, that sounds very, very cliche, but that type of thing, when they're ready to begin having the experience. And that is also the beautiful thing that I love about this format. So thank you very, very much for taking the time to
Yeah,
contribute to all of that.
thank you for inviting me. It was great questions, and I think it brought out a lot of great points. So appreciate your engagement with the conversation.
Well, my pleasure, my pleasure. I mean, it really, really was a joy, and I'll send you this as well when I release it. I'll fire the link over to you as well. So if you have any uses for it, feel free, and then I'll put it around my side.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
definitely share it with all of the people who are in my audience. So I think it was a great interview. So be happy to do that.
Thank you. That's very much appreciated. Well, you have a great day. You have your day ahead of you. I'm going to finish mine and have some dinner now and everything mindfully. That's the other thing is food has tasted a whole lot better since these kinds of practices, and that's a nice bonus. And construction noise has been a lot less irritating. So there's a lot of other nice little bonuses on the path there. But anyway, yes, thank you again, Sebastian. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.